What tactics do you use to bridge communication gaps?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is going in with the mindset that this is probably going to happen, because two groups of people know two very different groups of things. And one thing that I've seen a lot is that engineers kind of like to understand things from first principles or develop their own first principles and come up kind of with their own mental models. Uh, and it can be based on sort of what they've heard from other experts, but um, they're they're trying to engineering, you have to kind of grasp it yourself and come to your own understanding of it so you can work with it. But kind of in that process, engineers will come up with their own concepts and terms, or maybe things that are well studied and understood and have a different concept or term um, in an existing field of study. So I think first of all, I just go in with the assumption that this is going to happen. So what we're just looking for is where. And then a lot of the time, what I try to do is I'm listening. If I see this happening where it usually just means like some question just keeps coming up or some debate just keeps being unsettled meeting after meeting, and you start to think maybe people just don't really understand what we're talking about because I don't think this is actually the kind of thing that requires as much debate. Um, and what I usually try to do is restate for either one party or both parties what I think they mean when they're saying something. Um, so I'm trying to think of an example, but all the examples are like a little bit obscure. I mean, I remember this coming up a lot in nudge tagging. I think one thing that we were trying to do is we're trying to send the appropriate nudge. It's like this, you know, behavior science based tip for how you can kind of improve at your job, improve at building a good team culture, improve at communication, etc. We wanted to send one that's appropriate based on what your job is. And if your job is in retail, the types of tips that are appropriate for your work are kind of different if you're an executive salesperson. Maybe you're both trying to sell things, but maybe in retail it's not appropriate to say next time you drop by your coworker's desk, blah blah blah, because your coworker doesn't have a desk, or maybe you're actually usually alone. So, so we wanted to develop these tags so we could label the nudges with who they were appropriate to send to. And in uh, industrial organizational psychology, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, I'm just going to describe the types of things that exist. There's both kind of these job archetypes that you know about, like individual retail person or retail manager, and maybe even like to the degree of like at a clothing store or at a food in a food service setting, um, or executive leader in sales or sales manager, all these different kind of understood job titles. But those are kind of compositions of different features of a job. So someone who works is an individual contributor in research in retail. They're not a manager. They work face to face with customers. They don't have a desk. They usually work hourly shifts. They usually don't have a lot of control over their own schedule or even what their set of responsibilities is. Versus, a retail manager might have a lot of similar attributes, but maybe they have more flexibility in determining their own working schedule, maybe not. Maybe they have more flexibility in determining their responsibilities, maybe not. They also have responsibility for other people. So they're kind of this buildup of atomic features. And these like job characteristics or attributes versus job titles thing is, I think that was a place where there was a little bit of confusion because the engineer were just like, what do we need to label this with? This is a nudge for, you wrote it for someone in retail, we're just label it with retail. But, on the behavior science side, they're saying, well, we wrote it for retail. It's also appropriate for these other areas. So what we'd like to label it with is this more fine-grained thing. And then on the engineering side, we're like, we don't want to deal with all these, there's too many labels. We can't really like handle it yet. And so it just comes to like agreeing, okay, we would like to label this with the fine-grained characteristics. That's maybe not a reasonable first step because it's just a lot of work. So we're going to label it with these job title based features that are kind of more an agglomerate of characteristics. And then maybe in the future, we can like kind of add these finer grain labels and deprecate the old ones. But it required everyone understanding this kind of like complex landscape of different ways you can tag something and agreeing that we were on the engineering side going to do the thing that wasn't perfect on the psychological side, but we all understood why.